On today's Film and Whiskey, we'll be counting down our top 5 movies set in the state of Texas. And to celebrate, we're going to be drinking whiskeys from 3 Texas distilleries. Join us as we try whiskeys from St. Liberty, Garrison Brothers, and Belfour. That's all ahead on Film and Whiskey. Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode. Today we are continuing our top 5 series. This is something we come back to intermittently, Brad, and I think it's a fun little exercise for us to do. It's also a fun exercise for me to determine how many movies you've seen, because you do have quite a few movies come back time and time again in your top 5, regardless of what the topic is.
Listen, Bob, I don't think that this is a comment on how many movies I haven't seen. I think it's more of a comment on how many movies you have seen.
I think it's also a comment on the fact that you've only seen 5 movies and that you think you can just sneak it by me by you recycling the same 5 movies time and time again.
I guarantee you that will not happen in the next top 5 that we do.
All right, well, let's find out, because today's top 5 is going to be top 5 Texas movies. We decided to put this together because we are sampling 4 different whiskeys today, all from the state of Texas, from 3 different distilleries.
This kind of feels like a category on Celebrity Jeopardy from SNL. Movies set in Texas.
Yeah, so
with the name Texas in their title.
So that's the thing, is like, what defines a Texas movie? And Brad and I actually talked about this for a while, because I thought that there would be a huge pool of movies about or set in Texas. And so, we were scrolling through lists on IMDb and everything else, and I think what we decided on was A, you want movies that you actually enjoy, right? So good movies. And B, Texas has to play at least some role in the movie. It can't just be incidentally set there. Like on the list, they were talking about Apollo 13 because NASA is in Houston. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not a Texas movie. Do you know what I mean? Like, NASA could have been anywhere, and the movie still would have been the same because it was really set in space. So the Texas has to play some role in the film. And Brad, I don't think it's a coincidence that we're doing this during the week of No Country for Old Men, which is a movie that I think we can both agree features the terrain and the state of Texas pretty prominently, almost as a character in the film.
Right. Well, and you forgot about our third criteria, Bob, which is it can't just be a movie with Matthew McConaughey in it. Like, we all know that he is the physical embodiment of Texas.
Right.
But he can't, like, Sahara is not a movie about Texas.
Just because McConaughey's in it. Yeah, I actually only had listed 5 Lincoln commercials as my top 5. And Brad said, you can't do that. I was like, oh, sorry. I didn't understand the rules. So Brad, as we get into sharing our list here, the first whiskey that we're going to look at today is going to be from a company called St. Liberty Whiskey. Now, they have a super interesting, kind of mission statement, thesis behind their company. All of their expressions honor women bootleggers from Prohibition era. They are all about honoring women distillers. It is located in Austin, Texas. Their whiskey is distilled in Texas. It is proofed down in Montana. So it's a sourced product, but it's from the state of Texas, and they're headquartered in Texas. They have a few different expressions of whiskey. The one that we were sent is called Birdie's Bear Gulch Straight Bourbon Whiskey. It is an 87 proof straight bourbon, aged at least 4 years. I will say that this company might have my favorite bottle design of any company out on the market right now. It's this beautiful old-fashioned bottle that's actually based on a bottle that the owner found from the Prohibition era. It's got like this great kind of keyhole shape to it. It's like an arched thing. And all of the bottles are different colors for each of their expressions. They've got this really wonderful deep blue colored bottle for another one of their expressions. It is, if nothing else, Brad, it is a really fancy package to look at.
Yeah, the whiskey presentation really is immaculate. It's got this beautiful walnut-looking stopper on top. The labeling is great. The bottle itself is just unique and interesting. It really draws me towards this whiskey when you pair it with the fascinating story. Because in the end, like, one of the most beautiful things about alcohol in general is the fact that you get to drink it and share stories with friends.
Absolutely.
Like there's this idea of gathering around the watering hole to enjoy some whiskey and, just shoot the crap about what's gone on in your week. And St. Liberty is just really tapping into that with its story.
I completely agree, Brad. It really is a great story. The copy on the bottle is really great to read. I really highly suggest everybody go to their website and read about the women that they're honoring with these products. But before we try it, Brad, as we pour it out in front of us, can you share with us your number 5 Texas movie?
For me, it comes back to an Adam Sandler film set in 2005 called The Longest Yard.
Now, The Longest Yard. Nice.
Now, Bob, the only reason this movie appears on here is so that I can tell this simple story. So, Bob, I was a young man once, and I was watching this film late at night with my best friend Mike. And as we watched this film, there came a line in the movie where they said that us beating the prison guards would be somebody like Appalachia State beating Michigan. And Mike and I lost it because we're huge Ohio State fans, and we were like, it's funny because it happened. But then we looked up when this movie came out, and we realized that it came out 2 years before Appalachia State actually beat Michigan.
Wow.
And I was just like, this might be the most important movie in cinema history because it literally proclaimed the future.
Well, that's like, I think it's Back to the Future 2, where they like actually go into the future for an extended period of time. Somebody talks about a team winning the World Series or winning the Super Bowl, and in the year that it was set, they actually did that. Yeah, it's really cool when movies predict the future like that.
Yeah, so for me, it's a fun movie. It's fine. It's Adam Sandler. It's a remake. Yeah, it's a fun, interesting, fine movie, but the fact that it predicted the future has earned it a spot on my top 5 movies set in Texas.
Well, Brad, for my number 5 movie, I went with a kind of smaller independent movie that made the rounds on Netflix, and a lot of people ended up watching it because of that. The movie's called Bernie. It stars Jack Black in a based on a true story about this guy from a small Texas town who had like ingratiated himself with the whole community, was essentially a grifter, and started a relationship with like an old woman who he then ended up murdering at some point. It's like the way that the story is told, it sounds super dark, and it is like a dark story, but it's presented as kind of a dark comedy, and it is one of Jack Black's best performances. The director of the movie is Richard Linklater, who might be Texas's most famous director. I mean, all of his movies are set in his home state. He loves the state of Texas. This movie has Texas written all over it. And one of the things that he does so well is that he kind of incorporates these interviews with real people from this town talking about the character of Bernie, this guy who they all knew and loved. And he weaves them into the movie in an almost kind of documentary-like way.
Carthage is in East Texas, and that's totally different from the rest of Texas, which could be 5 different states, actually. You got your West Texas out there with a bunch of flat ranches. Up north, you got some Dallas snobs with their Mercedes. And then you got the Houston, the carcinogenic coast is what I call it, all the way up to Louisiana. Then down south, San Antonio, that's where the Tex meets the Mex, like the food. And then in Central Texas, you got the People's Republic of Austin with a bunch of hairy-legged women and liberal fruitcakes. Of course, I left out the Panhandle, and a lot of people do, but Carthage, this is where the South begins. This is life behind the pine curtain. And truth be known, it's a good place.
It's a really funny movie. It was super enjoyable, and I always love seeing Jack Black get roles that he can really sink his teeth into, because I think that he is such an undervalued, underrated performer. This might be my favorite Jack Black performance outside of maybe The School of Rock. I would highly recommend everybody checking out this movie, Bernie.
Well, and that brings me to my main question. Is The School of Rock a comedy?
Stop it. Stop it, Brad. We all know it's a comedy.
But
you
we're
still
taking
haven't
this.
gotten over it.
We just threw this into the way back machine that you're going to have to go back to season 1 if you don't get the reference. But in the end, we're not just here to talk about movies. We are here to drink some whiskey. So, Bob, how about we get into this St. Liberty?
Yeah, Brad, I am interested to hear what you think about this one because immediately upon pouring it out, this has a very distinct smell to it, and it does not smell like a bourbon. It smells to me like a highly, highly malted whiskey. And the funny thing is they are very transparent about what's going on in the mash bill here, and they say that it's only 2.5% malted barley in the mash bill here. But it
really potent 2.5%.
It really is. It smells like they're trying to do almost like a blended scotch kind of thing here, where it's like really heavily malted, really heavily sherry kind of thing going on. But when they did it with this mash bill, with so much corn in here, Brad, it ended up giving this a really weird note for me. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there is a chemical cleaner called Tarnex that you use to like clean coins with and like polish brass and stuff like that. This smells more like Tarnex than it smells like a scotch. And it is very off-putting on the nose for me.
Bob, this is, it's an unfortunate whiskey. It doesn't have a lot going on. Honestly, for me, it tastes like raw corn and like a malted barley.
Yeah.
And it I don't know, man. I'm not getting any oakiness or any wood in it. I'm not really getting anything caramel or sweet or floral. It kind of reminds me a little bit of when you take some stuff off the top, you know, when you're at the distillery doing a tour and you kind of taste it and you're like, oh yeah, that's interesting. That tastes like the grain. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm tasting here, but without the sweetness.
Yeah, they lean into the kind of savory notes that you get on a sherried, you know, Irish whiskey or a scotch. But the problem is that like those notes don't carry over in a very pleasant way to the taste. So this company is very, very new. It's really actually hard to find reviews of this product online. One that I would highly recommend is from one of our Instagram friends, the Right Spirit blog. They wrote a fantastic write-up about this product because they felt about as conflicted as we did, Brad. They really appreciated what the company's about, the transparency about how it's distilled, what the mash bill is, where they source it from. But they got these almost the same kind of notes we did. They talked about the raw, savory grain. They actually got a note of, and this is unfortunate, but on the nose they said wet cardboard. So like, guys, I'm struggling to find positive things to say about this whiskey, and I really, really want to. Part of me thinks that maybe if you try some of their other expressions, it might be good. I can't vouch for their other expressions, but if this is the one that they want to offer up for review, Brad, I have to say that I am not going to recommend this, and the kind of by a wide margin. I think something is just really, really off here, and yeah, I don't have much more to say. It's unfortunate because I want to say positive things. I think the bottle design is beautiful. I think what the company stands for is great. The product itself is just not there for me.
I think it might be time to move on to our number 4 movies, Bob.
Yeah, man. All right, Brad. Well, I guess I will start with our number 4 movie then. I'm going to go with the 2016 movie Nocturnal Animals. Now, this was a movie that came out right in the heart of Oscar season. It was directed by Tom Ford, who is most well known for being a huge fashion designer, who directed one movie prior to this, which was a huge Oscar-y type movie. This movie was positioning itself to be something big, and then kind of just got overlooked. And I thought that it was such a fantastic movie. It was really, really gritty and almost like No Country for Old Men in that way, where the sort of rugged, rough terrain of Texas becomes a character in the film. It's all about this guy played by Jake Gyllenhaal and his estranged wife played by Amy Adams. And she finds out that he is writing a novel about basically their relationship as a metaphor for their relationship. And the novel is incredibly violent, and he is, you know, his character in the movie is basically like tracking her down to kill her. It is a thriller. It is psychological. I think the ending of the film is fantastic. If you have not checked out Nocturnal Animals, I think it is absolutely worth a watch, and it definitely fits in here with our Texas theme.
Bob, all you had to do was say Amy Adams, and I'm in.
Yeah, man. And Jake Gyllenhaal. I feel the same way about both of them.
Yeah, Jake's fine and all, but Amy Adams, I'm in.
Let's do it.
Ready to watch it.
Let's do it.
All right.
What's your number 4, Brad?
My number 4 might be the greatest movie of all time. It is a little just great little film called The Big Green.
The Big Green?
The Big Green.
What, Brad, I
really
have never even heard of this movie before.
Ha! And you say I haven't seen enough movies.
Yeah, I stand corrected. Was this like a Disney Channel movie that you snuck in here?
It was not on Disney Channel. It was directed by Holly Goldberg Sloan.
Oh, of course.
Written by Holly Goldberg Sloan.
Holly.
It stars Steve Guttenberg, Olivia d'Abo, J.O. Sanders, my favorite character, Patrick Renna. This is a classic tale of love and loss. It's pretty much the soccer version of Little Giants and Sandlot.
Oh, okay. So it's a kid's sports movie is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Like the little redhead catcher that's kind of chubby from Sandlot is a little redheaded chubby goalie in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And he's pretty much the exact same character.
What if we found out that he just had a whole string of like making all the sport? Like we're going to find out that he made a cricket movie after this.
Right. Oh, of course he did.
Badminton.
Yes, he's
called
like
the big
in a
net.
polo. The big net.
So Brad,
Yeah,
what is it that you love about this movie? How did it make your top 5? Why did it make your top 5? What is it? Is Texas featured heavily in this movie, or are you just grasping for straws here?
No, I will say Texas is featured heavily in this movie. They do talk about how, like, in Texas, the only thing anybody cares about is football. So why are you even trying to help this stupid little soccer team? You know, the school soccer team is like going to get shut down, but Rick Moranis or somebody like him steps in to save the day. And yeah, it's just fun. Bob, the reason it is on here is nostalgia. I loved watching this movie as a kid. And when I saw it on the list of movies set in Texas, I was like, there's no way it's not going to be on here.
Well, Brad, we're going to keep talking about Texas movies, but before we get there, let's try this Garrison Brothers small batch. Now, Garrison Brothers has become one of the most famous distilleries from Texas. They are putting out fantastic products year after year. Some of their smaller batch, more highly kind of allocated things go for hundreds of dollars and are winning like double gold medals at different competitions. They were gracious enough to send us a bottle of their small batch straight bourbon whiskey. This is 94 proof, 47% alcohol. They also are really transparent about what's going in the bottle here. Brad, I know that you did not get a bottle sent to you. I had to give you a sample of this one. I have the bottle in my hand. It is also one of the most beautifully packaged whiskeys. They do such a fantastic job with the presentation, and I think that's going to be a theme throughout the day today. But for you, Brad, you don't get a chance to look at the bottle, so joke's on you. But why don't you give me some notes that you're getting on the nose of this Garrison Brothers?
Honestly, the nose is not super prominent. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of nuttiness to it, but there's not a lot going on. It's not super complex. There's not much sweetness there. I will say that. I'm not getting many sweet notes.
Yeah, Brad, the funny thing about this is that they say right on the label that this is at least 3 years old, but it smells very young to me, and it smells really, really corn forward. Like it smells like raw corn grain. We had a bonus episode a few months ago, Brad, where we tried the Nose Your Bourbon kits, and one of the ingredients they put in there is just raw corn grain. And this smells just like that. I mean, it is maybe a little bit of wheat as well. I don't have the mash bill in front of me, but I get a lot of young raw grain on this, and it smells a lot younger than it should given the age statement.
Yeah, and when I get into the flavor on this, it's not great. There's not a lot of complexity going on. For me, it's almost like it's reaching to taste like peanut butter, but it's almost like a really dry, dusty peanut butter that leaves you wishing you had actual peanut butter. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. But the funny thing is, I'm not getting any of the nuttiness on this that you are, Brad. It's really thin for me. It's kind of pleasantly sweet. Again, it's that really corny kind of base that you're getting here. It tastes young as well. Like, I cannot escape this young grain flavor. On second, third sip, after you let it sit out for a couple of minutes and kind of breathe, it's a lot of vanilla. But those are really the only predominant notes that I'm getting are young, unaged grain and vanilla. I just think that this would really benefit from some additional aging. And from what I know about this company, Brad, I think some of their more expensive, pricier, more well-aged bourbons probably resolve this issue. But this one, I don't know if I would recommend this particular expression. Would you?
Probably not. I think that if this was priced like $10 to $15, I'd be like, oh yeah, this is fine. It's solid. For the price it's at, it's good. I don't know what the price is on this, Bob. Do you?
Yeah, so they didn't actually send us a suggested retail price, but online this is retailing anywhere between $70 and $80 a bottle.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of go, you missed the boat a little bit, which is unfortunate. I want to drink good whiskey. I want to recommend people to good whiskey. But this one, it's just okay. It's not terrible. I will give it that. It's not terrible. It is drinkable, but that's about where I'm at.
Yeah, me too, Brad. And we're going to move on here, but I will say this. It's unfortunate that this is my first exposure to Garrison Brothers because I know a lot of people who love their stuff. And again, it is that more well-aged, more expensive expressions. But this is what the company chose to send us for review. And so on this particular expression, not a reflection of them as a company, but this expression is one that I would not recommend.
But what I would recommend is the Big Green. Go out and rent it, everybody.
All right, Brad, why don't you hit us with your number 3 Texas film?
Bob, my third favorite movie set in the great state of Texas is one of the greatest comedies of all time. Fight me on this. Office Space.
Oh, yeah. Great choice, sir.
Bob, Office Space is one of the most rewatchable, smart, dark comedies that I have ever seen in my life. I can't tell you how many of my friends I've introduced to this movie, which I feel like is kind of a cult favorite that has flown under the radar.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here. I just forgot. But it's not shipping out till tomorrow, so there's no problem.
Yeah. If you could just go ahead and make sure you do that from now on, that would be great. And I'll go ahead and make sure you get another copy of that memo. Okay?
Yeah, no, I have the memo. I've got it. It's right.
Hello, Phil.
Like, at this point, like, everybody's heard about The Room, and a lot of people have seen it. But, like, I feel like Office Space, I have so many friends who haven't seen this movie, and I'm just flabbergasted because it's so smart, it's so funny, and in a pre-Office world, I just don't understand how people don't fall in love with Office Space.
I will say, Brad, I think that movie is a victim of the studio again, not making it more available. Like, we live in an age now where everyone is subscribing to streaming platforms, and I don't understand why companies continue to be so stingy with their IP, because I think that the goal for these companies should be get these movies in front of as many eyes as possible. We talked about this with Spinal Tap. Why is Spinal Tap not streaming anywhere? Why do we have to rent it? And I think Office Space is the same way. I've seen it go in and out of Netflix a couple times. I don't think it's streaming anywhere right now. It might be, but I'm not aware of it. And it's kind of like you are, by being this stingy with your movie, I think this is a 20th Century Fox movie, by being this stingy with it, you are keeping future generations from falling in love with this movie. It's like, if you want to keep making money off of it, why wouldn't you cut a deal with Netflix to get this out there? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, because it's just great. Like, would you put this up there in one of your favorite comedies of all time?
I'd probably have to watch it again, Brad. It's probably been 15 years since I've seen this movie. I really enjoyed it. And a lot of people quote the, that'd be great and my stapler scene. Like, so I remember a lot of the movie. I know it's really funny. It has some iconic moments to it. I would need to watch it again, and I would be interested in doing so if they'd put the freaking movie on streaming platforms.
Well, next time you see it on Netflix, jump on it, because it's one of the funniest movies of all time. I would put it up there with like Spinal Tap as far as just dry, sarcastic, impeccable humor.
Well, Brad, we are taking a hard left turn into my number 3 movie, and it's a movie that we are both familiar with. I'm talking about Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life.
Let's go, dude.
Man, this is a movie
funniest movie I've ever seen.
A real knee slapper, that one. Brad, this is a movie that to this day I am still shocked you enjoyed, because I cannot grasp, of all the movies that I thought you'd absolutely loathe, this was like number 1 on the list.
Goodfellas, garbage. Eternal Sunshine, worthless. Tree of Life, 9.5 out of 10.
Primo. I do think that one of the things I love about this movie, even though it is talking about the big questions of God and morality and theodicy and things like that, it really does incorporate small town Americana by way of Texas really, really well into this movie. I think technically the movie is set in Waco or maybe right outside of Waco, but Terrence Malick, being from Texas, he uses his small town roots and he uses Texas as kind of like, I don't know, a microcosm, an example of what America was like in the 1950s. And it really, I think the setting really helps sell the story he's trying to tell about the way of nature and the way of grace. I think it's a perfect addition to our lineup here today, Brad. So yeah, number 3, The Tree of Life.
I will say, Bob, when you hear about directors like Terrence Malick and you look at their career and the kind of just art house cinema that they get into, it does make you think that they are either from New York, LA, or like France. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to think about like Terrence Malick being from small town Texas is a little bit of a shock to my system. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I totally get it, man. But hey, it's still on our list, and it is still a worthwhile movie to check out.
All right, well, there were our number 3 movies. We are now getting into 2 whiskeys from the same company, which is Belfour Whiskey. They've given us a bourbon and a rye to sample. So, Bob, what say you? Do you want to start with the bourbon or the rye?
Yeah, let's go with the bourbon, Brad. I have been dying to check out Belfour. They, again, I don't know, it's like a crazy theme we have with these Texas companies today. They have some of the most beautiful packaging I have ever seen. Their bottle design is incredible. It's this great kind of 1920s, 1930s Art Deco thing. Brad, you really should look up the bottle design because, again, I think this is one of those ones that we only got one bottle. And so you have samples. You got the short end of the straw again on this one. But
Bob,
go ahead.
I think I remember telling you this, but I actually did get the bottles from them.
Oh, did you? Awesome.
Yeah, I hate to tell you that you gave me some of the whiskey from them, but I did get them, and you are correct. They are spectacular bottles.
Yeah, they're really great. Also, I want those samples back now. You stole my whiskey, sir. But the one that we're starting with today, Brad, is going to be this bourbon whiskey, which is finished with Texas pecan wood. It is 46% alcohol by volume or 92 proof. Brad, I don't want to delay it anymore. What are you picking up on the nose of this Belfour bourbon?
Man, I have been like nosing this since we finished with the Garrison Brothers. This one continually gives me notes of like mint.
Yep.
And like just all sorts of fresh.
It's woodsy.
Woods, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so here's the weirdest note I've ever taken, Brad. I don't know, like, when you were growing up, what your backyard looked like, but we had, behind our house when I was growing up, a pretty heavily wooded area, and once in a while we'd have to go back there and weed or run the weed eater. And you know those really hardy weeds that grow out of the ground that are, like, so woody that they're almost like tree trunks, and you can't take the weed whacker to them, so you have to kind of, like, prune them down a little bit. It has this weird scent of, like, the whatever's inside of those weeds. Like when you cut a really woody weed out of the ground and the kind of sap gets on your hands a little bit. It has like mint is the closest thing that I think I can compare it to, Brad. I think you're right about that, but it's even more woodsy than that. It almost smells like, you know, freshly trimmed yard, but not grassy, almost more of like a woodsy, piney, weedy kind of scent. It's super unique.
I don't know why it popped into my head, because I guarantee you I have never smelt this wood in my life. But the word cypress popped into my head when I was nosing this. So
sure.
I'm just going to go with that and say that it smells like cypress.
All right, let's go with that. But I mean, like, even if you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, are you tracking with like the comparison I'm making here?
Oh, yeah, 100%, dude. This smells like I just got done weed eating.
Yep.
And my, like, it's
your jeans are covered with, like, chlorophyll. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I do think this is definitely not one, just from the nose, that I would say a beginning whiskey trier, you know, sampler should be trying. Because this is, like, really complex, and it's a note I've never, ever gotten on a bourbon before. I am excited to try it. I have a feeling maybe that comes from the pecan wood they've put in here. But, Brad, let's give this a sip and see what we think of it.
Whew, man. So my initial thought as it touched my tongue was that I was drinking water. I don't know if you got zero taste on the tip of your tongue like I did, but as it hit the back of my throat, I felt like the palate kind of came alive. I got all of that weedy, minty freshness, and it was really, really nice. But the upfront flavor was almost non-existent.
Yeah, I will say this has like the biggest burst of flavor of any of the three we've tried so far. I don't know if I would call this one particularly well balanced, but I will say that everything that was on the nose was there in the flavor for me. This is a very herbal, plant-forward kind of taste, and it's incredibly peppery. I like it a lot. But Brad, I think I will say again, I don't know if this is a whiskey that I would recommend to someone who's just getting into whiskey. This is like a very unique detour from your standard bourbon flavor profile. And so like if you're a fan of drinking bourbon, if you drink bourbon a lot, I would actually highly recommend trying this because it is so different and so unique. But I would caution someone who's like just getting into whiskey that this may not be the one for you right up front.
Yeah, it's a very unique, interesting whiskey that I honestly, I'll just say I'll recommend.
Yeah, I would too.
If you're listening to our podcast and you're brand new to whiskey, just know what you're getting into, and I think you might like it. If you don't end up liking it, great. Go drink something else. I don't care. This is some good stuff, though. Go give it a try. If you're down in Texas, go give it a whirl.
Well, Brad, that takes us into our number 2 film, and I am going to throw it way back to classic Hollywood. I'm going with the 1956 epic film Giant. This was the movie that was James Dean's final movie. He had just finished filming it when he got in his tragic automobile accident. It also stars Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor. It was basically positioned as like the Gone with the Wind of the 1950s. It's based on this huge epic novel about oil families in Texas over the course of a few generations. I actually really, really love this movie. It is a very long movie. But it ends up, the last hour of the film really ends up dealing with issues of race, of discrimination, of prejudice. It takes a turn that a movie like Gone with the Wind doesn't take, and I really love the direction it goes. I think James Dean is fantastic in this movie. He was nominated for an Oscar for it. The movie was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, including Best Picture. If you haven't seen Giant, I really do think that of those old, long movies, it's one that's definitely worth seeing. That's my number 2 Texas film.
Bob, one of my goals in this podcast is to continually make you just flabbergasted at movies I haven't seen. I have never seen a James Dean film.
Well, I mean, Brad,
I know that there's like 3 of them.
Yeah, there's only 3, so it's not super surprising to me.
But at the same time, I feel like, this is James flippin' Dean we're talking about.
Well, Brad,
he is so legendary in Hollywood, but I've never gotten around to watching any of his movies.
Well, Brad, I don't know if you've taken a look at the next few weeks on this podcast, but we will be watching a James Dean movie in just about 3 weeks or so here. So you will cross one off your list soon.
You know I don't look ahead. Come on now.
I hate you so much, Brad.
But my second favorite movie set in the wonderful mystical land of Texas is True Grit, 1969. I love this movie. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but I just think that you have John Wayne at his grumpy old finest. You have Glenn Campbell just being at the height of innocence and desire to prove himself out in the wild. I think Kim Darby just gives a stunning performance.
Yeah. Are you gonna let him do this?
I don't believe I will. Drop that switch, LaBeef. Put it down, I said. You're enjoying it too much.
You'll find that I go ahead with what I start.
You do, and it'll be the biggest mistake you ever made, you Texas brush popper.
I really, really love the original True Grit, and it easily jumped near the top of my list when I was thinking about movies set in Texas.
Brad, this is not the first time you've mentioned True Grit. I remember you talking about it with at least a couple of our guests on our My Favorite Movie podcasts where we've talked about Westerns before. I have a feeling this would, if we made a list of top 5 Westerns, this would be up near the top of that for you as well.
Oh, it 100% would be. It's such a great classic film. And I really think you get John Wayne at the peak of his career in a lot of different ways. There's some movies when he's younger that you see like, just John Wayne at the peak of his like middle to early middle age. But man, when you get him in True Grit, he's just perfect. I love him in this movie.
All right, Brad, that means that we only have one more whiskey to try. It is our second offering from Belfour, and it is their rye whiskey. This rye whiskey comes in at 47% alcohol by volume or 94 proof. And Brad, to be honest with you, I'm getting a lot of the same notes on the nose that I did on the bourbon, but it's more muted. Like, I think that this one, like, you get a little bit more of the rye grain on the nose, but you still get those really great herbal, minty, woodsy notes as well.
Yeah, as I go into this one, the nose is a little less prominent. I'm not getting quite as much on this as I was on the bourbon, but it's very subtle, and I think there might be a little more complexity to it than there was on the bourbon.
Completely agree. I do wonder, like, if we had flip-flopped this and tried the rye first, if we would be talking about how subtle the nose is, or if the bourbon just had such a big, bold nose that kind of anything would seem more subtle in comparison. I'm with you, though, Brad, that this one has more going for it. It's not just a blast of that sort of piney, woodsy scent. It really is kind of layered nicely with some prominent rye grain notes as well. And when I take a sip of it, Brad, I have to say, this is the best balanced whiskey that we've had today. Like, it does carry a lot of those same notes that the Belfour bourbon did. It's a little bit thinner on the palate even than the bourbon was. And I know you said that right up front, it tasted like water to you. On this one, the tip of my tongue, it's much, much sweeter. It's almost like a sugary kind of sweetness for me. I still like this a lot, and I actually think it probably is a better balanced whiskey than the bourbon was.
Yeah, this one, for me, I think it has a little more flavor up front than the bourbon did.
I agree.
You're getting all sorts of interesting and unique notes that you just don't often see on ryes. But I think where it ultimately succeeds is the fact that you still have that nice, spicy rye flavor that underlays everything else that is going on in this whiskey. I really think that Belfour Spirits is knocking it out of the park, man.
Yeah, man. I cannot say enough good things about the uniqueness of these whiskeys. Again, I would probably say the rye is better balanced, but it also has less of a punch than the bourbon. So it really just depends on your own personal preference. As to which one of these is the better of the two. I will say, Brad, that of the four whiskeys we had today, both of the Belfour whiskeys would be taking the number 1 and number 2 slots for me.
Oh, easily. I think I'd put the rye just ahead of the bourbon a little bit. But overall, they are some impressive whiskeys. They've got something nice going on down in Texas at Belfour Spirits.
All right, Brad, that means we have one more movie left in our top 5. So what do you say you share with the people? What is your number 1 Texas film?
Bob, I think that we should save my movie for last. It's just such a great film that I really want to hear what you have to put at your number 1 Texas movie.
I'm incredibly skeptical now, but okay, fine. My number 1 Texas movie, I think at the end of the day, I couldn't really pick another movie besides this. We did not include No Country for Old Men, or that probably would have been near the top for me. But when I think about Texas and what is important to the people of that state, football is the number 1 thing that I can think of. Aside from movies about barbecue, which I'm not sure if I have any. So, Brad, we live in the state of Ohio. Football is huge, huge, huge here, but it still pales in comparison to Texas high school football, where they build multi-million-dollar stadiums for their high school football teams. And the movie that best exemplifies this and the mania around it is Friday Night Lights. It's a great football movie. I don't know if I would call it like my favorite sports movie of all time or anything like that, but capturing the religion that is Texas high school football, there's not a movie that does it better than this. There's not a movie that gets into the psychology behind it as well as this one does. And I think for me, it was really a no-brainer that I had to put it as my number 1 movie about the state of Texas.
One of these days, you're going to have to get out of this house. You're going to have to leave her. Yes. You got to accept the fact that people have to take care of themselves, and that includes you. You understand that? Yes. Okay. The truth is, against some pretty overwhelming odds, if you do decide to accept that, Look at me, Mike. If you decide to accept that, you're going to seriously fly, son.
Yeah, Bob, I will say I have not seen the movie Friday Night Lights, but I did watch through the entire TV show, which I know is completely unrelated, other than the fact that they're inspired by the same book. And so I will say I loved that TV show. I think it gets bogged down a little bit in teenage drama, but for the most part, you're right. Whenever you start talking about Texas, you have to start talking about football. And I would imagine that Friday Night Lights is a perfect representation of that.
All right, Brad, you have delayed it long enough. Why don't you hit us with your number one Texas film?
Bob, I think you set yourself up for this with the last two top fives we've done. But my favorite movie set in Texas is Secondhand Lions.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
I mean, you had to see it coming, man. This is one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. I don't care that it's not a perfect movie. I just think that the performances you get are just amazing from all of the actors involved. I love the stories that are being told. I love that youthful innocence that you have. It's just such a great movie on so many different levels. And as soon as you started talking about Texas, I was like, oh, Secondhand Lions. It's in there. We're good to go.
So here's what I'll say, Brad. We can all have our favorite films. We can all have movies that, just like you said, you acknowledge that is it the greatest movie ever made? No, it's not. And I will second you on that. It's fine. It's a good movie. I know that you love the movie. You gotta stop using it in your top five, man. I think you just made it number one for coming of age films like a month ago, dude.
Bob, you got to stop giving me opportunities to put it in my top five. I'm putting this right back on your shoulders.
Listen, man, I'm just going to say that, like, if it comes up again in our next few top fives, I'm going to be really suspicious. Like,
well, when you choose top five movies with a lion in it, I'm going to be like, all right, Secondhand Lions. Just cue it up, man.
I'm just going to start giving you ones that just completely, there's no way that you can use it. And I still have a feeling that you will try to sneak it in there. Top five movies with an all-female cast. And you're somehow going to sneak in Secondhand Lions.
Secondhand Lions. Dude, I really do love this movie. There's a lot of nostalgia there for me. I think it's funny. I think it's witty. I think it's smart. But yeah, that's it for me, man. Texas, Secondhand Lions. Let's go, dude.
Well, we want to say thank you to all three companies that sent us whiskey today: St. Liberty Whiskey, Garrison Brothers, and Belfour Spirits. And we want to say thank you to listening for our top 5 movies about the state of Texas. If you have a movie that you'd like to write in about, it could be one that we didn't even touch on. Brad, I mean, Texas is a huge setting for horror movies. I'm sure someone out there has been waiting for us to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So if you have a film that you think should have been included but was not, please take time to write us. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @FilmWhiskey.
Or you can give us a phone call. Our phone number is 216-800-5923. Once again, that number is 216-800-5923. Or you can leave us a voicemail on our anchor.fm/filmwhiskey webpage.
We will be back with another regularly scheduled episode on Monday, but until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.